This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today we have a special guest, the son of the legendary Hall of Famer, both WWE Hall of Famer and Pro Wrestling Hall of Famer, former WCW superstar, former NWA star. I believe he held the house show attendance record for WWE with Hulk Hogan, Paul Orndorff, and this is his son, Travis, the son of Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff. Very sorry about your loss. How are you holding up?
Oh man, don't start with that. I'll lose my stuff. I've had to make sure I was composed for right now, but man, I don't have the words. I really don't. Thank you just doesn't it doesn't qualify. It doesn't, like the notes that I've received, the notes that I've received, and the messages and the condolences and the stories, the donations. I knew that people loved my dad, but you don't know until you just don't know until it happens, and you're sitting back going, I hope this is received. Thank you, baby. I hope this is received as I intended, which is to celebrate his legacy, his life, and that every fan that wanted to have an opportunity to be a part of it. And I've received messages from Peru, from Denmark, from China, Japan. So a couple things I had to get translated, but it's been excuse me, it's been amazing. There's a hole in my heart that it'll never be filled. But just seeing how much people love my dad has been, it's been amazing. I'm humbled. I'm grateful. It's just been the most amazing experience. And I'm so grateful. I'm grateful that I had the relationship I did with him. And I'll share this. My wife was there with me Monday night. And so I walk in the room, and for the record, I did give him a couple of beers, but they were non-alcoholic. And so I came in and I said, "Dad, you want a beer?" And he said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Okay." So I go, pour him a little one that he could have. And he got up and he hugged me really, really tight. And that was the picture that got captured. And then my wife stayed to his left. I stayed to the right because his right arm is paralyzed. And I took him into his bed, laid him down. And as God is my witness, I was so glad she was there, because I don't think anybody's going to.
Oh, we lost your sound. I don't know if you can hear me, but we lost your sound temporarily.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Oh, it's back. It just came back.
Okay, give me 1 second. I got an idea.
Okay.
Sorry.
So fans, if you're just tuning in, this is the son of Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, Travis Orndorff, who had Paul with him the week prior to his passing. And he's just fixing an audio issue with his phone, and he'll be back with us. And he's here to discuss the live stream that he's going to be doing of the funeral tomorrow. So he's going to give you all the information on the funeral as soon as he gets back on here. He will answer some of your questions if anyone has questions about his father. We're just waiting for him.
I'm back. I'm here.
You're okay. We have your audio. Maybe you want to just pop.
There we go.
Oh, there you are. Okay,
Sorry.
you're back.
My wife tried to tell me to get it set up, and I know. Look, there's a lot going on. So, so I'll finish up real quick with the story I was sharing. So my wife and I were escorting to bed. He decided it was time to go to bed. It was about 11:30. And he had stayed up later than usual, which was such a surprise. And then, so I was on his right side because that's his weak side. And I was so glad my wife was there, because it's one of those things that happens and you just can't believe it. But I was on his right side. We laid him down, and as God is my witness, he grabbed me with his right arm. I don't know how. I don't know if it came off the bed All I know is he gripped me and pulled me close and kissed me on the cheek and said, "Trav, I love you." And those were his last conscious words. After that, he laid down and honestly just didn't get up. And so we were there we were there with my niece. We were there till his very last breath. It was a horrible but wonderful experience just to be apart from from my beginning of my life till his life. And he meant so much to me. There just isn't words. So hopefully we've captured that with some of the images that we've been able to share, to see, different sides of my father. Most people wouldn't know that. I joke, but it's a true story. Like when he was in town, he came to all my baseball games, but I don't recall how many times he had a shirt on because he was always in the back of the truck trying to tan. So, my dad's just a different guy, but God, he was present. He loved me unconditionally, and he absolutely, without a doubt, adored his fans. And I mean, adored them. There were people that would just stop by the house. He would take pictures with them. I know of going to different events where the signings stopped at 3 and we didn't leave till 6 or 7, specifically like on military bases and things like that. He was involved in the Special Olympics, and, for hours beyond what you would imagine he would invest. And so again, I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's been very special. So thank you.
Now, the funeral is actually going to be live streamed tomorrow, and you're doing this as a thank you to the fans that actually helped donate to his funeral GoFundMe because of all the feedback you've had from all over the world. How can they watch the funeral tomorrow?
Hannibal, I tell you what, I think I already sent you the link.
I'll put it in the description, actually, after we're done this interview.
Okay, great. Yeah, I placed it in I'm actually very low key on social media. I've only had the Instagram for 6 months, and that's because my wife made me do it. And it turned out to be, a platform as this happened. So completely coincidental, but we are live streaming it. If you go to my Instagram page, Travis _Orndorff, in my bio, I put the link to copy and paste. And again, I've received requests from all over the world. And after getting that many requests, we were able to get it taken care of, live streamed, and let everybody be a part of it. And I'll share a little tidbit. I think, if you think you're coming into a funeral for some, businessman, you're way off. We got a camouflage casket and everything. He's going out the way he wants, and with doing the things he loved around the people he loved.
So what are some stories about Paul that the fans might be surprised to learn that only know him as like the tough guy from wrestling?
A couple things. I think most people would be surprised that he became a Christian when he was in his mid-30s, about 35. I think a lot of people would not be surprised, but if you were to go back and check, he had multiple track and field records in Florida. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, some of them, the broad jump in particular, stood till the early 2000s. And this is back from his high school years. But he was a ridiculously good baseball player as well. I still actually have his glove. I took a picture of it and posted it, I think. But I have his baseball glove from high school. He grew up in a trailer park. Most people think he's from Tampa, Florida, but he's not. He was born in Winchester, Virginia. His dad was a butcher, and his parents divorced, but they moved down near Tampa. And my dad went to high school in Brandon and obviously grew up in Tampa. But he worked in a chicken coop when he was a kid. They didn't have any money to scrape together. His mom was quite abusive. And one of those sad things that you find out about somebody becoming triumphant in their lives. She was the mom that didn't go to a single one of his baseball games, football games, not a single time all the way through college. And it is one of those sad stories where he used to have the tickets at the front door for the time that, she wanted to come. So, but there was no involvement from his mother. And I've told many people this many times. Mr. Wonderful was his way of surviving his environment and protecting his inner child. Not to get into the details, but he experienced abandonment at a young age, violence. I think a lot of people know, but my dad used to bare knuckle fight like on the weekends for money. A lot of times going to pick up his dad from a bar, and the things that really made my dad is, I mean, he was an avid hunter, and I mean addicted. Anything he did, he was so intense. Like he wanted to be, the best at. And so he was out in the woods all the time. And one of the worst things, we've been laughing about this for a week, but he was the biggest like river. Like he would mess with you all the time. Like he would catch you. In fact, the first night he was here, I had him in the room and we had a camera on. I was sleeping maybe 10 feet away, and I didn't hear the alert go off at 1:30 in the morning. And he was standing over me and he started poking me, and opened my eyes and he goes, "Boo." And I jumped off that couch and he laughed for 3 minutes. And if you know anything about my dad, like he was constantly trying to get you with a joke or something. His favorite, though, going back to the hunting, is he would love to get somebody the first time because he always put deer pee on his clothes. I don't understand it, but it's a thing. And so he would trick people with it. But just goofy little things that my dad did, man. He was intense, but he was intense in everything. So like, even like, I kid you not, I might've been 30 and he was like, "Son, come sit on my lap." And I'm like, "Dad, I'm 30. All right. Cause I know you can still beat me. You can still beat me down." But I'll tell you one thing. He never gave me a pile driver, which is a question for some reason people ask. Not that he didn't want to at times, but he was never violent. I don't remember getting spanked or anything like that. My dad would just have a conversation with me, a very honest conversation, transparent, and with the way that he showed love, I would listen because of that. He didn't have to get angry or even loud. He knew he would just have a conversation that I would be respectful and listen. Beyond that, I mean, I really could go on for hours, and that's not a good idea.
How was his relationship with Hulk Hogan? Because I understand that him and Hogan were actually pretty good friends outside the ring.
It's funny. If you, okay, so understand, and I mean this with all due respect, I'm not a wrestling fan. I mean, I appreciate it. I respect it. I respect the hell out of it. I respect the athletes and the individuals, but it's just not my cup of tea. I mean, I grew up in the locker room. People are like, "Didn't you watch matches?" I'm like, "No, I was in the locker room the whole time. Like they taught me how to play poker and guitar, not anything to do with wrestling." Um, so my experience is totally different than what people would expect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. So, as far as his friends in the business, I know obviously Brian Blair was a close friend of his right up until the end. Who else remained friends with him over the years?
Well, I'll tell you, this is actually, this happened probably 2 weeks ago. He randomly, and I mean randomly, wrote down the name Rick Root. And I'll tell you, just from when I was a kid, him and Rick, when he passed away, my dad lost it. I mean, my dad would bawl. I mean, he loved Rick, and he was always cool because when he'd come over, he'd bring over his Jaguar, right? And so my dad and Rick would go get in the hunt car. He'd throw me the keys. I got to drive the convertible Jaguar. It was green. I think it was an FJ40. I don't know, but anyway, that was the kind of relationship he had. Brian, obviously, they were pretty close. And in fact, I spoke with Brian pretty much every day for the last week. And Brian got the opportunity, and then keep him in our prayers. He's got a major surgery happening in the next couple of days. I understand it. And so keep him in your thoughts and prayers. But we talked to him. He got to speak to my dad towards the end. So, the other guys, like he always really, I don't know what their relationship was like, because that was his friends, but I know him and Steve Austin were really tight, and at one point, and in fact, I learned how to drive a 3-speed on the tree. Was actually the first time I learned to start driving with a 5-speed vehicle, or a manual, was over at his house. So there were several that came through the years. But what's funny is I planned, we were planning the funeral. All his friends were local. I mean, were his hunting buddies, his fishing buddies, and his family. He kept a pretty small circle. As big of an entertainer he was. Now he'd go to the gym, and if anybody walked up and wanted to work out with him, they were welcome. But other than that, he stayed pretty low key. And so beyond those few guys, I mean, I went through his notebook and contacts and stuff, and I see a bunch of different wrestlers' names and people that he kind of talked to on a regular basis. But after he got cancer, some people may have talked to him once, and if you did, a lot of it was you talking and him agreeing, because there was a little bit missing. So there's several wrestlers over the years, a couple that have called, and obviously out of respect for them, I keep it private. But there have been some people that reached out, but I don't know any of them. Like, people that think that I think the WWE should pay for his funeral, it's not at all like what I think. Or do I think the wrestlers have some kind of responsibility? I mean, it's a community, but at the end of the day, that was his job. I wouldn't expect my employer to do that. That's my responsibility after I get an income. So, but the wrestlers that have reached out have been sympathetic, grateful, just all have nothing but positive feedback about him, and their experiences with him. He was a very loving man. I think that if you ask me what the biggest surprise is, the dude had a heart. Like, he easily would cry if he just thought about my grandfather, Ross Maxwell, his grandfather-in-law. Like, like, you just had to know him. He just had the biggest heart. He just did. Now, was he impatient? Absolutely. Did he have his flaws? Completely. But if you sprinkle all that with love, you get a lot of freedom with what goes on, and the relationship you have.
You mentioned that you had a story about Paul and Vader that you wanted to share.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, and I hope I'm crediting him correctly, but there's a promoter named Tony Richardson, who I've talked to over probably the last couple of years when he wanted to do signings for Dad, or we try to arrange it. But not long before Leon passed away, Tony got a phone call, and both my dad and Vader wanted to meet up and discuss what happened. And so Tony arranged it, and Leon went to my dad and said, "I'm sorry for what happened." My dad apologized to him, and they hugged it out and laughed and joked. So as big as the business is around all these fights and things, these guys are human beings. And those fights, they sound badass, but let's just be honest, they leave scars on you. Like, who wants to fight their friends, people that they cared about? So it was really cool to know that they got together and were able to make peace with each other. I thought that was really amazing, and a testament to both those guys, that they would set down their ego. I used to always try to explain to people that sometimes you could talk to my dad and you would talk to Mr. Wonderful, and sometimes you talk to my dad and it was Dad. So I knew when he was gimmicking, and it just, depending on the person he was talking to, it kind of came out. But the non-kayfabe Paul had a lot of regrets, things that he regretted when he was impatient, or when he was fighting, or some things like that. But all things that we're all imperfect. Those were just some of his flaws, and I think things he actually worked on later in life.
What was this pit fighting type stuff that you were mentioning that he did? Because I guess he talked about this at the Cauliflower Alley Club speech that he did in 2015 too, and it was kind of like an early form of UFC.
Well, so it really just started in a bar parking lot, like, for real. Like, it was legit, just bare knuckle fighting fights. From there, I know he went into like where they would kind of organize it, but like, this was a rough town. I can't remember the town it was, because it wasn't Brandon. I always want to say it's Winter Park, but I'd have to call my aunt and double check. But like the area they were in, like by no means was it any kind of professional environment. This was just straight up, I'm going to beat you for a couple $100s.
I see. So he just liked getting it on and mixing it up like that.
Well, yeah, here's what I'll tell you. He had a very violent upbringing. Like his mom, there's a story. He was 15 years old, and so he had to pay for everything for himself. His parents, it was just a real weird environment. And so he had earned his money for the week. He had cash in his hand. And so he goes to his bedroom and his mom asks for the money. And he says, no, I'm not giving you money. This is my money. So she walks out around the corner and hides. And when he comes around the corner, she knocked him out with a cast iron skillet and took his money. Like straight up, just took it out of his pocket. So he grew up in a very violent environment. So it's not a surprise that's kind of where he, was gravitated towards. But yeah, some people, a lot of people are like, your dad was a fighter. And some people are like, your dad was a lover. And I'm like, my dad loved to fight. Like that's the problem.
As far as his diet, he was always in such top shape. What kind of diet did he keep?
So dad kept, he was big on, protein. Obviously he took protein shakes and he kept his vitamins and his, the different, assortment of vitamins. We went to a place in Jonesboro. I'm trying to remember the name of it. But they sell their vitamins. He was getting them there for 20, 30 years. And then, I'll tell you, and somebody actually pointed this out. They were like, I didn't see any butter or salt on your table. And I'm like, you won't. Because like legitimately, we were not allowed to have salt or pepper or salt on the table, no butter. If we wanted to season our food, occasionally we could use ketchup, but it was hot sauce. For fish, it was lemon wedges and hot sauce and pepper. He was like, when we'd be on the road, we'd go to a Holiday Inn. He'd grab out like 3 or 4 cans of tuna fish and he'd bust them out and eat them with mustard and a cracker. That was his to-go snack. That was his Lunchable, if you will. But it was always low salt, high protein, very, very clean, fresh, steamed vegetables. Like my mom cooked them. Like when he was home, she cooked because that's what my dad would eat. In fact, he very, very, very rarely would eat red meat. It was kind of one of those once a month things. But I'm serious when I say, I thought food was horrible until I got older because none of it had any flavor. So people I went out to dinner with people like at Applebee's or something, like, what is this food? I've never had anything like this, because that's just not what we were allowed to eat. And so he was religious, and I mean religious from the time that no sugar, no salt. Everything was, his old motto was eat to live, not live to eat. And to this day, I eat one meal a day. I eat to sustain, not because of any type of desire to eat. It's kind of weird, but it's ingrained in me and several of our family members where it's like, we just don't eat that way. I can't remember the last time I intentionally had fast food. And I'll tell you now, the worst I've eaten in my life happened in the last few weeks. So I know he'd be looking at me right now asking why I put on 10 pounds. But yeah, he was religious with his diet.
When he was feuding with Mr. T, I guess you would have been a kid. Did you ever get the opportunity to meet Mr. T?
I did. I'll tell you what was cool. So, and this is something you probably wouldn't realize. So every year from probably the time I was 5 or 6, my dad would, let's say he flew into town because he really did work constantly, right? So he might fly into town on a Thursday and be home on a Friday and flying out on a Saturday, or even flying out on Friday night. So that Thursday night, Dad would say, you want to skip school? And I'm like, yep. So I'd skip school and I would hang out with him the entire day. And then when he would travel at least once a year, I would go on a trip with him. So, I was at a lot of those shows when that happened. Mr. T, Hogan, I was there, but I was just a small kid. I didn't know much, and I certainly didn't care much about it. I just wanted to be with my dad. But I can remember when we were there was one time in Philly and one in Boston, but the fans figured out where we were at, and we had been taken in an ambulance to a car down the street just for safety. And then they figured out where we were, and Dad had turned on Hogan at the time, and they started to try to turn the car over. I was in the floorboard of the car. I was in the floorboard of the car till we could get out of town just for safety reasons. That's kind of the craziness you might see in a normal and what we would do as we were on the road. Like, in fact, I spent a month with him in Australia when I was 13. I spent a month with him in New York, Connecticut, Philadelphia. Like, I'd love to tell you, like, we did all these things when we traveled there, but I saw the Holiday Inn and the bus in the locker room, just the same as he did, and whatever local gym was there.
Did he kayfabe you when you were young about wrestling being more of a performance than a real competition?
I've asked a couple people have asked me that. I don't remember ever having a conversation about it. It was always Dad's job. I knew he wasn't going to get hurt. And I mean, like, literally, obviously he got hurt several times, but I knew that he wasn't in danger. I think that was about the only thing that I recall, but they didn't have to talk about it. I was in the locker room while they were planning the matches. So it never connected, like the way people see wrestling, it never connected that way. I came in from the other side that you didn't have to tell me it was fake. I already knew. Like it's just like Republicans and Democrats. They will fight all day long, and then they go to lunch together after the argument. And that's what it was for wrestling. So, I remember, I think I was 18 or 19 the last time I saw, several of the wrestlers, because my dad was still at WCW, and I saw Terry and Randy and, a couple of the guys. And, but every year I got to travel for about a month or 3 weeks or even sometimes longer. And my dad would take me out of school to travel with him. So that was my experience with wrestling from the beginning, was being on the backside of it as it being his job. Now, he made sure that any discussion we had, and because he didn't raise a quiet son, but he would look at me every once in a while and go, like, if I started to say something, he'd go, "Kayfabe," and I go, "Yes, sir." And so that I knew what I was supposed to do at that point, which is shut up. It was pretty interesting, but it was his job. Like, it really was his job. And again, I can't, there's so many people, if you saw him, like, he just walked around without a t-shirt on all the time and hunted and fished. So this I guess the pedestal I have him on was for how he loved me as his father, not for anything he ever did in the ring. Although I always thought it was cool, but it wasn't, it was how he treated me that made him so wonderful. God, that was cheesy, but it's true.
Did you grow up in Florida with him, or was he living in Georgia mostly at that time?
So when I was born, we lived in South Florida, and then Pensacola, and then Oklahoma, Louisiana, Tennessee, and then I think we settled in, and then Riverdale, Georgia, College Park, and then we moved to Fayetteville, Georgia. And I think we finally settled in Fayetteville when I was 5 or 6, right around that time. I can't remember exactly, but it was like 1983, so I'm thinking I'd be 5. But up until that time, like, we had moved it seemed like every 6 months to a different territory till he went to Fayetteville, and then obviously he started working for New York.
And I understand at one point after his injury, he opened up a bowling alley and just focused on that bowling alley for a while. Was he a big bowler? What was with going into that domain?
So, yeah, that is a great question. And the truth is, he had financial advisors, like many of them do, that recommended him go into a business, obviously to create income and wealth in retirement. And he got a great manager, Steve Brown, and it went well. But, one of the things he did with the bowling center, because he had become a Christian a few years before that, it was non-smoking and non-drinking. That is not conducive to a bowling center. I don't care where you're at in America. So that certainly hindered sales, and he wasn't willing to compromise on it, much to his own detriment. But ultimately, I was a kid. He wasn't a big bowler. He was pretty good. And it was advised for him to go that route. But I think he would have been better served not going into business, and have stayed in the personality realm, because he just wasn't a businessman. Like, he didn't go to school. He didn't know the numbers. That wasn't his gig. Right. So, but a lot of these athletes get in that position, and and they look for opportunities, and sometimes you don't make the best investment.
As far as the stories about the Iron Sheik showing up at the bowling alley for workouts, are those true?
So there are times when they were working. My dad and Sheik were like kind of, not, they weren't close, but like, he lived downtown, or he lived near us, as did Steve Regal and Chris Benoit. And, I saw those guys all the time where I worked at the time. And so those relationships, like, they would, because the gym was down the street, the two of them would go to the gym and then stop by the bowling center, would be that kind of thing. And man, I mean, talk about like the worst dress attire to wear in public. Like, anybody that complains about women's yoga pants, just go back and see what my dad and the Sheik wore back in the 80s when they left the gym. It was hilarious. Fanny packs and all. It was beautiful.
Brian Blair was telling me, and I don't know if it's true or not because of his heat with the Sheik, but that he would bring like a case of beer and just drink the beer and do squats at the bowling alley. And at some point, your dad had to ask him to stop or something because it was distracting the bowlers.
Well, yeah, he would. I think he was doing things that was distracting. I don't know about the beer because I don't think because we didn't let beer in the place. He might have chugged it in the parking lot. Man, Sheik's crazy. I don't care what anybody says. Like, I know that dude. He's like a nice dude, but he's nuts, and he's always been nuts. So that doesn't surprise me a bit. If he did it, I really wouldn't. I know the story about one time. Oh God, no, I don't care anymore. So I do know the story about the time they got on a plane, and somebody who will remain nameless lights up a joint on the plane, and they had to land the plane, and they kicked that wrestler off the plane so they could get to the next town in time. So just know they're all crazy. They're all nuts. Every last one. They had to be to do this job, but they're all crazy.
That is true. There was a fan on here asking a few minutes ago if you have any of your dad's wrestling memorabilia, and you were telling me before we went on the air here that you might not have it in your possession now, but you are going to be getting some.
Well, yeah, actually, so there was a couple of things that were given away or were sold at some point against my better judgment. But it turns out a lot of his memorabilia was stolen a couple of years ago by a family member, and we didn't know where it went. So I started looking for it. And recently, the gentleman that got it, who is my brother Dennis, my third brother, he actually got it and waited till now to tell me, hey, I've been saving all this for you because this is what happened, and I got it to keep it safe. So there are a long black Orndorff robe coming back, a short one. These would have been probably late 70s, early 80s. I have a good tub of multiple pairs of tights, clippings, magazine articles, pictures. I have a pretty big tub of that, and there's more of that as well. I think the one thing that I will pursue is my dad wasn't in any capacity to give away his items to the Hall of Fame. Obviously, he had already been in the case of dementia, so those two Hall of Fames, I'm going to request those items back for the family, simply because his dementia and everything. It was something that when he was able to talk about it, it was something he deeply regretted. But that's something I'll take up with those people when it's relevant. Right now, I just want to focus on the celebration of his legacy. You never want to see anybody pass away, but my love of God, if you're going to go out the way he did with the impact he's made on that many lives.
Now, of course, there was some controversy over the first video you released, and I'm only bringing this up because there's fans bringing it up, and you explained how you didn't regret that to me in the end, and you ended up removing it and putting out the new pictures of him drinking beer with the haircut. But do you want to just address that for the fans that are talking about it?
Absolutely. And so let me start by saying that was not something that I ever wanted to do, ever planned on doing. Over the past few years, he's been verbally, emotionally, and physically abused. in his own household. I had filed multiple adult protection service orders and could not get any traction. When he was put in the hospital, nobody knew, and all the and the hospitals were told there were no immediate family members available. When I went to the hospital after I got vaccinated, could finally see him. That was the state he was in, and that had, if you look at it, there's no way that happened overnight. That happened over a year's time. So I had filed abuse orders the year before, as had other people that were trying to help me. And at that point, after I saw that and they told me they couldn't do anything for me, I said, if you don't do something, I'm going to post it socially. I'm going to post it publicly so I can get people involved, because I don't know who you want me to contact to tell you that he's abandoned. But I've got video proof of what's going on. And it turns out there were multiple attempts to contact a family member. They had to call the police to go out there to get her to respond. And so I was desperate. And I'll tell you, brother, there's nothing on this earth I wouldn't have done at that point to get him home in my custody. Nothing. I do not care. But they told me the state of his condition. They told me what was going on and how much time he had. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no way on God's green earth I was going to let my father die in the system, much less a hospital none of us could get access to unless it's one person for 30 minutes a day. He was abandoned. I felt desperate. And when you're trying to get people to go out and see him, you're relying on them going out. But at that point, I had video proof to go, hey, this is what's going on. This is what is the reality of the situation. And luckily people got involved and were irate. And did I take some heat for it? I think I was not prepared for that, because my intent was never, I guess what maybe people, I was trying to embarrass him. That was the last of it. I was trying to get him home. I was trying to get him safe with his family, where the rest of us got to spend 3 weeks of peace with him in his final days, instead of dying on tubes in a hospital with no one around. So I will never regret doing it. I'm sorry if it upset people. It was, if it upset you, how do you think it made me feel to see that? But there was no option. As far as I was concerned, I was going to do whatever I had to do, whatever. And that video pissed a few people off. And, most of them, at least that I know of, have come back to me and said, now that I see the journey and I see the end result, what you were trying to accomplish, now I get it. But, the conversation was, you're going to ruin his legacy. And I'm like, I'm not ruining my dad's legacy by getting him home with family. No matter what you think. If my dad had a conversation, I assure you that he would have wanted to come home and be with me in his final days, not up in some hospital tied up to tubes that nobody could go see him. No, like it was one person a day for 30 minutes. That's it. And I wasn't going to stop it. Once I saw that, I had my wedding, and then I was on the phone before that. When I got back, we put the ball in motion and we got him home. And so, no, I don't regret it for a second. I know what my intent was. And I think the people that know me, specifically every one of our family members, like from across the country, none of them could even get in touch. Like nobody knew what was going on. So that video allowed them to find out what's going on so they could come visit. So I'm not pleased that I had to do it. And once I got him home, I took it down because it had served its purpose. But it was put out there publicly so that the social workers and the people in the hospitals had evidence of what the situation was, combined with already their experiences trying to get in touch and get him home. So, no, I don't regret it for a second. I do it again twice. And I hope, and I say this with all sincerity, I hope your son would do the same thing for you.
As far as his dementia issues, did you ever get confirmation that all of the concussions and head trauma he took over the years caused the dementia, or was this something that was going to happen no matter what?
So we don't have a history of Alzheimer's. And so what I understand, so I'm only going to share with you what doctors have told me. What we did was get in touch with Dr. Amalu, and Dr. Amalu is, I think he's from the movie Concussion. Will Smith played him. He came and got his brain. We were able to work that out. The brain scans prior, so there was brain scans done as I got the medical records just a month ago. There was clear Alzheimer's, and they described his brain with blood and fluid, extensive blood and fluid, and then his temporal lobe volume was diminished beyond what an Alzheimer's patient would be. So, obviously he's one of the very few people that lived 70 years with and went through what he did, because he couldn't take care of his body. He survived stage 4 cancer and was still trucking, right? So his brain is going to have enough of a maturation time that I think they're going to be able to investigate further. But all of them, as I understand it, including, I spoke with the people at the funeral home and the technicians came out, they looked at his temporal lobe and they were like, oh my God, I've never seen anything shriveled up like this. Not like this one. So he died of natural causes or of Alzheimer's. But if anything, what I believe is, it exacerbated it and continued it. So even if he did have it, it took it to a level 10. But my perspective and my belief system, based just on our family history, is that most likely that this caused the concussions caused the dementia, not the other way around.
There's a bunch of fans throughout the course of this interview that have been asking, did you ever get the chance to meet Andre the Giant when you were backstage with Paul? And did he have a relationship at all with Andre?
I'm not gonna lie, I don't think Dad had a great relationship with anybody. He was pretty to himself. Like, I spent time with Junkyard Dog. He was always my buddy. I loved him. Loved him in the ring. Loved him. Like, I would watch his matches. But I'll tell you, I was like 9 years old, and I was in. It was when the Omni was still in Atlanta, and I had won a karate tournament, and so I had a 6-foot trophy for the competition and like a 3-foot trophy for forms, and so my mom drops me off at the Omni to go see my dad as he's performing, and as I go in there, there's Andre the Giant and Big John Studd and Bobby Heenan and my dad, and they're playing around. And so Bobby Heenan used to always, like, those guys joked. Like, you just, like, I mean, you hear about these locker room ribs, like, it's legit. They're brutal. But anyway, he ended up handcuffing me to Dominique Wilkins' locker and saying he was going to do a magic trick. And then what he ended up doing was, turning the lights off. And then my gi came down and they started just poking me in the sides and in the stomach. And they thought it was hilarious. So, yeah, I did meet Andre the Giant in one circumstance. I did meet him another time. I just remember the first time that I met him, like, his hand just covered my forearm. Like, it wasn't a handshake. It was a full arm shake. So, my dad always respected him. But, that was a different style of wrestling, that was a different style. Like, that Andre was so much more of a, his stature, his size, his strength, his power. And my dad was very much more finesse, and it was more of an art.
Did your dad ever teach you anything about fighting or shooting?
Yeah, he told me to not do it. So, like, I'm not going to pretend like I'm 5'9.5", maybe $185. Like, that gene skipped me. I'm not sure who got it, but I didn't get it. But, as far as fighting, my dad, like, that was never, he helped me out when I wrestled in high school. But no, nothing like that. Like, every once in a while I would ask him for how to do a wrestling move, and simple stuff like tying up and stuff, and we would play around like that. But no, not in particular.
What exactly was wrong with the side of his arm? We always hear that was caused by Hulk Hogan. I don't know if that's just rumor and innuendo, but
no, that's not true. Hulk Hogan didn't do that. I don't know who told you that. I don't know who said that. My dad had a bicep slap tear, and it atrophied. And because of the nerve damage in his neck and down, he never got it repaired. And so it continued to atrophy because he didn't want to have the surgery. I don't know why, but he really did not want a scar on his body. So he lived without it for years. What is crazy is I ended up with a similar accident myself and left my right arm paralyzed. But I was able to get a couple surgeries to get it fixed. And I just have 50 staples from my elbow to my chest from something similar, working out as well. But no, I don't, my dad never blamed that on one individual. And I think to do that would have been crazy because it was part of the business. Nobody took a cheap shot. I know there was speculation, but no, my dad never ever blamed anybody for that injury or one. Like I remember one time he got hurt doing a pile driver, and I don't remember who the guy was, but that guy really did buckle up to cause the injury, and he was pissed. But other than that, no, not any that I know of.
Brandon wants to know if he and Piper were real friends backstage.
They were buddies. Yeah. Roddy was really cool. Like, I mean, seriously, was just this cool dude. I didn't spend a lot of time with him. You don't get the opportunity to, these guys are their job. They're on the road. Like, and then after they were done, they were at the bars and stuff. So my dad and I went back to the hotel room, but the time I spent with him, every time I did, I mean, just, I don't know, just like, I got to talk to his daughter a couple days ago. And we were messaging, and like we could go on for days with stories about our dads and even tell you about what they thought of other people and different things like that. Like, but they were buddies. And I'll remember the last time I saw Roddy, he came up and gave me a big hug, kissed me on the cheek, and said, yeah, you're better looking than your father. That's good. And then he just walked off. Right. So that was Roddy. He just he played around.
Is there any wrestlers other than Vader that your dad didn't like? Someone's bringing up that at one point he didn't want to lose the title to Junkyard Dog and Mid-South. Or was he just fine with everyone really, other than a few fights here and there?
Yeah, so let me give you two versions. There's the Mr. Wonderful that if you got him on the phone and got him talking, sometimes he would, start kayfabing or whatever. But my dad was at peace with everybody. So keep in mind, my dad's, and he had an ego, and he didn't like losing or giving up the belt to anybody. So were those things there? Yeah, but that was so petty, and that was really young and early in his career. When JYD passed, my dad was very upset. My dad had no ill will towards. I mean, I even said this. My dad acted like an a-hole at times, and he had some fights. I think people bring up Tony Atlas all the time. Like, it is what it is. Like, these guys got over that. Like, they're not that petty. But I would say, the only person, and this may sound weird, the only person I ever heard my dad really regret how he treated, believe it or not, was Vince McMahon. Because when he left wrestling, he just didn't show up. And he always regretted that. Like, when he left New York, he just didn't show up. And he regretted it his entire life. I remember asking him, Dad, why don't you call Vince and apologize and just tell him, and he's like, nah, it's just too late, but he always regretted how he left New York. And that was something he said to me. So there were regrets, and even some regrets with certain people, but at the end, he was at peace with everybody. He understood that was just a part of their lives.
That iconic red robe that he wore, is that still around, or is that one of the missing pieces of memorabilia of him?
That is one of the missing pieces. The blue robe, tights, and boots, I think, will be coming back. And I've got the red tights and the red boots, but I don't have the red robe. So I'm gonna, now that, as weird as it sounds, it never crossed my mind to do any of this until now. But it's certainly important to me to make sure that we preserve that, and it's within the family and stays within the family. It's not, sold or auctioned off. So, that's something I'll work on, and Lord willing, I'll get it back.
When you were a kid, did you ever get any bullies or anything in school because your dad was such a famous villain in wrestling and kids would like take the heat on you, or were you pretty much okay?
No, I think so I went to private school, and it was a pretty strict environment for most of my life. But I'll tell you, I remember one time there's a buddy of mine named Sam, and we were 21. And when he looked at me, he goes, bro, I'm so sorry I hated you in high school. I'm like, oh, I didn't know you hated me. He's like, yeah, I couldn't stand when you were around. I was like, why? He goes, man, your dad turned on Hogan. I just couldn't get over it. And so like there's little stories like that where I'll find out where somebody was mad at me or didn't talk to me and I never even knew it. And they're like, yeah, your dad did this and it pissed me off. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I hope you're over it. I am. So
As far as Paul Roma, who he teamed with in WCW, do you know if they got along outside the ring? Because Paul's not one of the most liked people in the business.
yeah, I never had that experience with Paul. I've heard that. As far as I know, my dad and him were cool because I know Paul came and spent the night at the house a few times when they were in town. So they were like I just always assumed they were pretty close because he came and spent the night at the house, a few times and had dinner with us. And but again, I'd go back to the guys. Most of his friends were local, and there was a few wrestlers he kept in touch with. A couple promoters. I'm blown away though by the number of people that think they know what my dad would say or do that have talked to him one time in 20 or 30 years and think they understand his legacy. It literally trips me out when I talk to him at one point in time, probably 15 times a day because he was stop calling. So like, what my dad's wishes were, I guarantee you there's nobody that knows better than myself and our family.
You mentioned that you weren't really a wrestling fan, but was there a favorite match that you had of your father's? And also, did he have one match that he was particularly proud of that you were aware of?
Yeah. So he, when they were at the Pontiac Civic Center, I don't remember the details of the match. I think it was the Pontiac or Pontiac Silverdome, right? Maybe I don't remember.
Yeah,
I have to look it
Silver
up.
WrestleMania 3, maybe.
I can't remember. I have to go back and look it up. But there was a specific match. It might have been the one where they had the indoor record. But I think he was more fond of runs than he was of matches because back then, at least what I remember, we would go to each town and he would redo the match. So that it would be the same match a couple times in different towns, and then it would pop up on the TV. It would pop on the TV, that Thursday or whatever. So that match in particular, I think my favorite. I loved I like the promos. Like that for me was where I really would laugh. I mean, I still go back at some of them. In fact, I've had to I used to get afraid like somebody was going to Google me when I would get employed, and the human resources department would be like, "I saw your father, and it appears he said this," and they would not hire me. But my favorite match, I think, will always be the cage match. And I think a lot of people like WrestleMania 1, but Mr. T wasn't that much of a wrestler. It was kind of thrown in together a little bit. But that match between him and Hogan, I think, was intense, insane, and you were on the edge of your seat from the beginning to the very end, and then to the very end again.
Did he ever tell you if he enjoyed his time at the power plant back when he was helping run WCW's training facility?
Dude, that's actually when he was the happiest. He had his old Toyota Land Cruiser, all souped up, and man, he loved training. And I mean, he loved being in the gym training, and he loved training other people. Practice for him was he really wanted to do. Forgive me 1 second. He really wanted to. Train. He loved it. So those relationships with those guys, I remember Chuck Palumbo coming over to the house. I got to speak to Chris Nowitzki recently. Those guys that trained with him, they got his heart, they got his all. And buddy, he was ripped. I mean, and when he was in his 50s, he was better ripped than I had ever seen him in any picture, other than maybe a couple during, the 85, 86 run.
Yeah, I understand. He even trained Tank Abbott a little bit there, who of course he was from UFC, and Tank was telling me that your dad was quite a character in those days.
Oh man, he was there's so many different, this dude had layers. Let's just leave it at it. But he was a little nuts. I mean, you had to be a wrestler. Let's just be honest. And you have to be a little nuts to keep walking around like you're Mr. Wonderful. But he pulled it off, I think.
As far as his Hall of Fame ring, someone's asking what's going to happen with that.
We are, that is something we're looking for at the moment. but they will, all those rings will come into my possession, and they'll be they'll be part and parcel with the family and with his memorabilia.
Were you the only child, or was there other children that your dad had?
I have an older brother. So my dad, first of all, he's not from Tampa. He's from Winchester, Virginia, but he grew up there. But my dad is junior. His dad was also Paul Parlett Orndorff. So my brother is Paul Parlett Orndorff III. He's 10 years older than me, but he's been out of my life since I was about 6, and he's been incarcerated most of my life. So it really was just me and my dad. And then my dad raised his 3 grandchildren. So I call them my sisters, but I guess technically they're my nieces. But my dad raised those 3 girls, and so that's kind of the immediate family.
Did he enjoy being a babyface or a heel more? He was good at both, but it seems like he would have been the more natural heel.
Oh, he hated being babyface. He used to always say, "There's no money in being a babyface." He loved being a heel. It matched up to what he wanted to present himself as this tough guy. And don't get me wrong, he was a badass, like not no joke, but he still was an amazing man, like a godly, loving man.
During his peak, do you have any idea what his gym lifts were like? Like, was he a 500-pound bench presser?
He wasn't big on bench pressing, and part of that, but he could. I mean, he would squat. I was talking to a buddy the other day, and I mean, he would squat 475, 485, 10 reps like it was nothing. I mean, like nothing. He would deadlift that like it was paperweight. He wasn't real big on maxing out. He always thought that would get you hurt. And I never saw him go into the gym competitive. He went in there to train. I mean, I saw him sometimes pick up 20-pound dumbbells to do something, and people would be surprised he would use that. He's like, "Well, that's how you get the definition." It was like his way of working out. He was a machine, like a complete machine. I worked out with him a few times, and I mean, it was unbearable. Like, you didn't want to ever go back. Like, you went one time, you were in so much pain that like you just never wanted to go back. There was no like gradual ease your way into it. Like, nah, bruh. It was all on. It was intense from the second you walked in to the second you left.
Now, we did, while you were talking, I did put the link in the description for the funeral tomorrow that you are going to air live for the fans all around the world that want to see that celebration of his life. Is there anything you want to touch on before we wrap up here?
I think, again, I'll come back to I'm extremely grateful that all of you I'm extremely grateful for all of you, for all your stories, for your donations and everything. And just, I would ask that you enjoy the ceremony tomorrow. I know that it's a celebration of his life, and his legacy will live on, and we will live on with it. And I'm so grateful that he touched so many of you the way he did. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for coming on and sharing those memories with us. Maybe one day, I know Piper's kids wrote a book on Roddy Piper after he passed. Is that something you would consider?
If I ever get that phone call, absolutely. I think to not tell his story and his testimony would be wasted, right? That would be a waste to not tell his story. So, I'm absolutely open, and I have faith that somebody's going to reach out to me someday and go, "Hey, are you ready?" And we'll cross that bridge then. But absolutely, I think it's a great opportunity to tell his story, his relationships, his real story. The abuse he suffered, but how he overcame, and he overcame over. And even to the last day, he made a comeback. Let's not kid ourselves. We saw how bad he was. And a week later, he was drinking a beer and sitting on my couch. So he never quit fighting, baby. People thought he was going to go peacefully. I'm like, he ain't going peacefully. You don't know my dad if you think he's going peacefully. That doesn't mean he'll be in pain, but he's going to fight to the last breath. So I just want to say again, thank you so much to everyone. Thank you, brother, for bringing me on and giving us the opportunity to share the ceremony. Just thank you. God bless.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please